My name is Adunni, and for days after that terrifying night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Mama Femi wasn't done with me. Her words, "You don't belong here," echoed in my head like a curse. Every sound in the house made me jump. Every shadow felt like it was watching me. It was when I found the clay pot cracked in the kitchen that I knew she was still working against me. That pot wasn't broken before, and no one had been in there except me. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed help. I went to see Baba Tundi, the village elder. Everyone knew he was wise and could see what others couldn't. He sat outside his hut, chewing on a stick, his eyes calm but sharp as I explained what had been happening. "Mama Femi is trying to hurt me. I'm sure of it," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't know how to stop her." Babatunde leaned forward, his voice low but steady. "She's testing your spirit, Aduni. If you show fear, her power will grow. You must protect yourself." He handed me a small bottle of blessed oil and a string of charms made from beads and cowries. "Place these around your home. But remember, fear is her greatest weapon. Do not give in to it." I nodded, clutching the items tightly. I didn't feel safe, but at least I wasn't alone anymore. That night, I hung the charms around the house and placed the oil by my bed. At first, everything seemed quiet, but then it started again. The scratching at the door. It was louder this time, more deliberate, like something wanted me to know it was there. I whispered a prayer, clutching the bottle of oil. Then I heard faint laughter. My heart raced as the lantern flickered and suddenly went out, leaving me in complete darkness. "God, please protect me," I whispered. My whole body trembled as I heard footsteps outside the window. When I gathered the courage to peek through the curtain, I saw her, a shadowy figure, walking around the house, holding that same calabash. She was chanting again. I stayed awake all night, clutching the oil and praying. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't live like this anymore. The next day, I found Mama Femi at the marketplace. My anger was stronger than my fear. "Now, I know what you're doing," I shouted. "Leave me alone." She turned to me slowly, her face calm, but her eyes cold. "You think you can stand against me, girl? You are nothing. My son will see the truth soon enough." Her words cut deep, but I refused to let her see my fear. People in the market were staring, whispering, but I didn't care. I turned and walked away, determined to protect my home and my marriage. When Femi came home that evening, I told him everything. I showed him the charms, described the chanting, and told him what I'd seen. But he just looked at me, confused. "You're saying my own mother is trying to hurt you? That's impossible." "Come home early tonight," I said, my voice firm. "See for yourself." He hesitated, but finally nodded. "Okay, but Aduni, this is hard to believe." That night, Femi and I sat in the dark, waiting. At first, everything was silent. Then it started, the scratching at the door. I glanced at Sola, and his face was pale. The sound grew louder, and then we heard her. The chanting. "That can't be," Femi whispered, his voice shaking. The door creaked open on its own. Mama Femi stepped inside, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She held the calabash in one hand and a strange knife in the other. "You think you can take him from me?" she hissed. I didn't think. I grabbed the bottle of oil and threw it at her feet. The moment it hit the ground, she screamed, and smoke rose from the spot where it landed. I began praying loudly, clutching the charms. Femi just stood there, frozen. Mama Femi stumbled backward, her glowing eyes fading. She dropped the calabash and collapsed to the floor. I only wanted to protect you, she whispered to Femi, her voice weak, to keep you safe from another loss. Femi knelt beside her, his face torn with emotion. I stood, clutching the charms, my fear finally replaced with resolve. The morning after Mama Femi left, I sat on the porch watching the sunrise. The house felt different, quieter, lighter, as if a heavy shadow had lifted. Femi sat beside me, his hands fidgeting with a piece of straw. He hadn't spoken much since everything happened. She's gone now, he finally said, breaking the silence. But I still can't believe it. My own mother. His voice trailed off, heavy with disbelief and sadness. I placed my hand on his. Femi, she believed she was protecting you in her own way, but now we can move forward. Together. He nodded slowly, his grip tightening around my hand. You're stronger than I realized, Adunni. I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. We sat there for a while, just watching the village come to life. The sound of roosters crowing and children laughing felt like a sign of new beginnings. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in weeks, I felt hopeful. A few weeks later, I began to feel different, tired, lightheaded, and craving strange foods. At first, I thought it was the stress catching up to me, but something deep inside told me it was more than that. I went to see the village midwife, and after a few questions and careful checks, she smiled warmly at me. Congratulations, Adunni. You're with child. I felt my heart leap. Tears filled my eyes as I held my belly, a sense of overwhelming joy washing over me. After everything we'd been through, this felt like a blessing, a sign that we were meant to be here, to build our family in this home. When I told Femi, his reaction was a mix of shock and joy. He laughed, pulling me into a tight embrace. Adunni, this is the best news I've ever heard. That night, as we lay in bed, Femi spoke softly. This child, there'll be a reminder of how strong you are, of how much we have overcome. I promise to protect both of you, no matter what. A few months later, as my belly grew, Mama Femi returned to the house. She stood at the edge of the compound, her head covered with a scarf, looking unsure of herself. I hesitated when I saw her, but Femi took my hand and led me to her. Mama, he said, his voice firm but kind. Why have you come? She lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. I came to see how you're doing, to apologize. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, relief, and a strange sense of pity. She looked smaller somehow, as if the power she once held had drained away. But then she looked at my belly, and her eyes softened. You're carrying my grandchild, she said quietly. I I don't deserve to be part of their life, but I hope you let me see them one day. Femi looked at me, waiting for my response. I took a deep breath before speaking. Mama, what you did hurt me deeply, but for the sake of this child, I'm willing to forgive. We can't change the past, but we can move forward. Mama Femi's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, her voice breaking as she said, Thank you, Adunni. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. She stayed for a short while that day, and though things weren't perfect, it felt like the first step toward healing. A few months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Femi named him Ayodele, meaning joy has come home. The house that once felt cold and full of shadows was now warm and filled with laughter. Mama Ade visited often, and though our relationship was still fragile, she doted on Ayodele like any loving grandmother. As I rocked Ayodele to sleep one evening, I thought back to everything we'd been through, the fear, the anger, the pain. It all felt like a distant memory now. This was our life, our family, and nothing could take that away from us. We made it, I whispered to Ayodele as he slept peacefully in my arms. We made it through.